Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Medexus Pharmaceuticals webinar. I'm here with Medexus' CEO, Ken d'Entremont, and CFO, Roland Boivin. Medexus is a pharmaceutical company listed on the Venture Exchange with the ticker MDP and on the OTCQX with the ticker MEDFX. It has an established and growing presence in North America with a focus on a number of therapeutic areas. Medexus is growing substantially, both organically and through M&A. Ken and Roland will take us through the presentation, followed by a question and answer period. First, I will caution that the presentation may contain some forward-looking statements which can be viewed on the company's website. And with that, I'll let Ken take it away.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you to everyone tuning in on to this webinar today and listening to the Medexus story. Basically, what we've got here is a strong growth story, specialty pharma company that's had excellent progression from 10 million net revenue, 34 million net revenue, then 74 last year, and we're well on our way to over 100 million net revenue if you look at the first quarter that we released, I guess about a month ago. So, we really see this continuing for some time into the future, as we've got very much a portfolio of products that are in growth phase. And so we expect this business to continue to grow simply through organic growth for some time into the future. And obviously, we will supplement that with additional licensing and M&A activity in the therapeutic areas that we're interested in. We did do a transformative transaction in February of this year, February 28th, where we acquired a second U.S. product called IXINITY. That was a $32 million revenue product with a 40% growth. And it really significantly changed our operating ratios. We went from a 65% SG&A to revenue ratio to 42%. So clearly, it strongly leveraged the infrastructure that we already had in place in the U.S. And that really is our business model. We've got two strong commercial platforms in the U.S. and in Canada, and we're looking to further leverage that platform as we add products in the therapeutic areas that we're interested in. This year, we will be nicely over 100 million net revenue. Last quarter, we produced $5 million worth of EBITDA and 4.1 of positive cash flow. So the business model, as Tina suggested, is very much organic growth of the existing portfolio. Most of our products are very much in strong growth phase. And that will continue for some time into the future as our sales force continues to push hard to promote those drugs. But we also have a very strong business development effort. We've been successful in the last 2 years in doing 2 M&A transactions and numerous licensing deals. And we expect that effort will continue and will produce additional products for both U.S. and Canada. You may have seen recently, we announced the hiring of a new senior vice president of business development. He's based in the U.S. He's very much on the buy side, pharma experience. So we think that he will help us close what we're working on now and then further accelerate our business development effort as we go into the future. We don't really do any R&D, although we do a little bit of product development. And so when you look at our statements, you'll see an R&D line. It's really just product development of existing drugs and improving their label. And the one spend that we have ongoing now is a pediatric study for our newest drug, IXINITY. That will expand the label by about 30%. So it's very, very targeted product development. This is the sales force that we have in place, both U.S. and Canada. In the U.S., it's 26 people calling on rheumatology and hemophilia treatment centers. 26 people is more than enough to cover all of rheumatology. There are only 2,600 rheumatologists in the United States, and about 140 hemophilia treatment centers. So clearly, a sales force of 26 people is more than sufficient to cover all of that audience. They are supported by another approximately 25 people who would normally be in an office in Chicago. Obviously, through the COVID period, they're working from their homes. In Canada, we have a larger sales force per capita, and that's primarily because we have a broader product portfolio. In Canada, we have 4 representatives who are calling on rheumatology. In Canada, there's only 350 rheumatologists, so obviously we easily cover that market. Plus, we're calling on some hospitals as well that treat glioblastoma, and I'll talk to that drug in a few minutes. We also have a sales force of 19 people who are promoting Rupall, which is a prescription antihistamine. They are calling on primary care physicians, high prescribing primary care physicians, not in our audience, and allergists and pediatricians. So we have a very good commercial platform, and this is the group that we want to leverage as we add new products to our portfolio. This next slide is really describes why we feel strongly that we've got an excellent organic growth story. As you can see, most of our current revenue, 92%, is it very much in growth phase. Rasuvo and Medexus both are auto-injector or a pre-filled syringe of methotrexate for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, just different brand names in the 2 different territories, US and Canada. They're growing very strongly. Rasuvo was about a +8 5 years after its launch. Medexus is growing at about 100% several years after its launch. Ixinity, which is the asset in the US that we just acquired in February, it's $32 million US and growing at a 40% rate. Rupall down the bottom there is prescription antihistamine in Canada. That is growing at a 48% rate. So you can see, our biggest products are growing very, very strongly. And then we have several products that are just in their launch phase. Products like Gleolan. It's for glioblastoma, most common cancerous brain tumor. Triamcinolone hexacetonide, which has just now been branded Trispan. That is for various forms of arthritis and is the drug of choice in juvenile idiopathic arthritis, which is a type of arthritis that affects children. So we've got very much a strong growth story with existing portfolio. We think this can lead us to $150 to $200 million net revenue in the next few years. So we've got a very good organic growth story, but clearly we're going to continue to do licensing and M&A work in order to further build out this portfolio, in particular in the US. In the US, we currently have 2 drugs. We expect to have many more that will further leverage the infrastructure that exists in that marketplace. This slide here really demonstrates our commercial experience and strength in the US. This is the sales trend for Rasuvo since launch. We're the green line. Competitive product is that dark blue line. We launched after they did. We caught them, passed them, and now hold a dominant share in the auto-injector market of methotrexate. That is unusual in that usually the first product to launch becomes the market leader. That's not the case here because we just did a better job in formulary and reimbursement. We've got more lives covered. We have better formulary positions. So that's a very difficult position to display. So we expect Rasuvo will continue to be a dominant player in this market segment. But we still have lots of room to grow for Rasuvo because even though we hold about a 75% market share in auto-injectors of methotrexate, we hold a relatively low percentage of total methotrexate. So our focus is converting more patients away from vials and oral methotrexate to the auto-injector. So we've got lots of room to grow. It's about a $700 million market in the US. This is Medexus in Canada. This is exactly the same product with a different brand name. This is growing really strongly. Again, it's because of reimbursement. We have this reimbursed in all provinces except for British Columbia and Manitoba in the public system. So clearly, we're getting very strong uptake throughout the country. And we expect this to continue for some time in the future. It is patented out until 2027. Rupall, as I mentioned, this is a prescription antihistamine in Canada. Rupall is growing very strongly year over year. It's 48% growth last quarter versus the same quarter of the previous year. And you can see it's got this funny kind of growth pattern, and that's due to seasonal allergies, which tend to spike in the springtime, as you would expect. We've just come through the most recent allergy season. And again, even in spite of COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a very, very strong spike in Rupall sales. So this trend continues even in spite of the current pandemic. I should also point out that most of our portfolio is not really affected by the pandemic. It's because most of our portfolio is for chronic disease. People continue to get their prescriptions filled through retail pharmacy. We're not dependent on hospitals or clinics for delivering our drugs. So we continue to show strong growth even through the pandemic. IXINITY, as I mentioned, this is the asset that we acquired February 28th of this year. We purchased this product from Aptevo for $30 million upfront in cash, but 9.5 of that was working capital, which was primarily saleable inventory. So basically, we bought a $32 million net sales product, growing at a 40% rate for less than one-time sales. We are also paying them a small royalty, 2% for 2 years and then 5% for 13 years after that. But again, obviously that is sales-based. So we think this was really well priced and is a good growth asset for us. It's currently doing about $32 million, but it's in a marketplace that's $734 million. And it has some clinical benefits that would make people want and doctors want to prescribe this product. So we think this has got good, strong growth potential well into the future. I should also point out that we purchased worldwide rights to this product. It's only been launched so far in the US. We are in the process of getting it registered in Canada, and we will launch it ourselves in Canada through our own infrastructure. And then we'll out-license it in all our territories. We have no plans to build infrastructure outside of the US and Canada, where we currently have our sales and marketing teams. This is the sales progression of IXINITY. You can see that they've gone from 11 to 23 to $32 million net sales. That was mostly under the Aptevo management, where they had 12 people on the drug, 12 salespeople on the drug. We now have 20 salespeople on the drug. So we've got a bigger effort in the US, so we think that that type of growth will continue into the future. As I mentioned, there is a good clinical reason to use this drug relative to the other drugs. It's got an excellent safety profile. It's got a longer recovery rate, 98% recovery. Basically, that just means more drug goes to work. And it's got a longer half-life than the competitive products, which means you simply don't have to inject it as often. So those are important clinical benefits, which are allowing us to steal patients from the competitors. This is a rare disease. It's an orphan drug. There's only 4,000 to 5,000 hemophilia B patients in the US. In Canada, there's about 710. So, where we're sitting today, we've only got about a 4% market share. So obviously, we've got a lot of room to grow. We will be adding a pediatric indication. We're doing a study. It's about 40% enrolled at this point. Once we complete that, which should take us probably 18 months, when that's completed, we'll be able to add the pediatric indication to our label, which will increase the market potential for us by about 30%. So we think that's a really good opportunity for us to start to get new patients, new starts onto our drug. Obviously, we are looking for more and more opportunities. We've got some good growth opportunities, products that have just been launched. One of them is Trispan. This is triamcinolone hexacetonide in Canada. Basically, it's the longest acting corticosteroid. So for various forms of arthritis, they inject steroids directly into the joint to reduce inflammation and pain. This is the longest acting one. That feature makes it the drug of choice for juvenile idiopathic arthritis, basically arthritis in kids. The reason it's the drug of choice is because you obviously can't get a child to hold still to do an interarticular injection into a knee joint or an elbow joint or shoulder. They need to be sedated. So Clearly, there's a lot of hospital costs and system costs in order to do those procedures. So they want to use the drug that lasts the longest, which is our drug, Trispan. The same characteristics exist for adults. There's no adult that wants to get a knee injection more often than necessary. So obviously, there's good opportunity for us to grow in the adult market as well. We've got this product now launched, and as of a couple of weeks ago, fully reimbursed in Canada. Again, all provinces except for BC and Manitoba. And so our sales force is out there now promoting this drug and driving uptake. We are working on this drug for the U.S. The same opportunity exists in the U.S. And again, we would use our current infrastructure to promote that. When we purchased the U.S. business from Medac GmbH about 24 months ago now, October of 18, we negotiated a first right of refusal on everything else in their portfolio. One of the most attractive drugs in that portfolio is something called treosulfan. Treosulfan is a conditioning agent to be used prior to stem cell transplantation. Basically, it's a common treatment for leukemia patients. The reason this is so attractive is that chart on the left, which is a head-to-head comparison of our drug, treosulfan, versus busulfan, the drug they most commonly use for this situation now. And the difference in those two lines at 24 months is a 26% improvement in overall survival. 26% more people are alive at 24 months as a result of using this drug versus the competitive drug. So clearly that's a very dramatic improvement in survival, which means that it's likely to get a very strong uptake in the market. We've got this currently being sold now in Canada via the Special Access Program. And as a couple of weeks ago, we filed with Health Canada, and it has gotten an expedited review, which means a 6-month review period rather than the traditional 12 months. We do have a ROFR in the U.S., and we're working on the licensing rights for the U.S. as well. I would point out that the competitive product, busulfan, in the U.S. Hit peak sales of $140 million. So obviously, the market potential for this drug is excellent. I did mention Gleolan earlier. This is a drug to assist the surgical resection of glioblastoma, which is a cancerous brain tumor, the same brain tumor that Gord Downey, tragically hip, or Senator McCain in the U.S. Passed away from. Basically, what Gleolan does is it causes cancerous tissue to fluoresce pink under blue light. And so the two photos on the slide, the white one is what physicians, surgeons have traditionally seen when they're doing the resection. It's very difficult to see where the cancer is and where it ends. The blue light one at the bottom shows the cancerous, quite obviously, it's the pink. Anything that fluoresces pink is cancerous, and the surgeon would take that out. So it allows them to do a more complete surgical resection of the cancer. And if you do a better resection, then you improve the survival of the patient. So there's also almost a doubling of survival at 6-month progression-free survival using the drug versus not using the drug. So again, a very, very attractive opportunity, meets an unmet medical need in the marketplace. We have just gotten this now approved in Canada, and we're starting the commercial work as we speak. So I'll let Roland really talk to some of the financial performance over the last quarter.
Absolutely. Thanks again. So as you can see on the slide here, our first quarter for this year, we achieved revenue of $27.5 million versus $16 million last year. And that really shows the importance of organic growth when you have a portfolio that has organic growth, which is exactly the portfolio we have. Along with this shows as well the addition of Ixindi, which was a transaction that Ken mentioned a little earlier, which occurred back in February of 2020. I should point out that we have a fiscal year end of March 31st. So when we look at Q1 here, we're talking about the June 30th number. So what that does is scale is so important in the spec pharma industry or market. It really shows that when you can generate additional revenue to this tune from 16 million to 27.5 on a quarterly basis, and you keep the SG&A at a fairly similar rate, obviously you're going to start generating some meaningful EBITDA and cash flow. And so we were able to generate adjusted EBITDA of $5 million and cash flow from operations of over $4 million this past year. And again, Ken mentioned that famous ratio of SG&A to revenue from 65% down to 41% roughly. On the right-hand side, what you're seeing is really a nice chart of the type of revenue growth on an annual basis that we've been showing. So going back a few years ago at only $10 million, and then going to 34, 74. And again, if we look at the performance in this quarter here, we certainly believe we're well on our way to be above the 100 million revenue for the fiscal year. On the next slide, on slide 16, what you're seeing is the cap structure. I'm not going to go into details on that one here. Of course, if you have questions, happy to answer them. You have the share structure on the top side. You've got the analyst coverage. So we've got Bloom Burton, Canaccord, Mackey, and Stifel covering us right now. And on the right-hand side, you're seeing the information on the ownership. So you can see that management directors own roughly 12%, with the rest being fairly split between institutions and retail.
Thanks, Paul. We go through management and board. This is the management team that's in place, all experienced people, all commercial operators. Our strength is really our commercial expertise and our ability to take products, get them through the regulatory process, and drive them to sale. The people are in place that allow us to do that. We've got a very active board. Peter van der Velden, who's general partner of Lumira Capital, is our chair. Excellent Rolodex. They only invest in healthcare. The other board members are all experts in their field, whether it be on the pharma side or the finance side. I would point out Adele. Adele's the most recent addition to our board. She ran Pfizer US, $13 billion business. Obviously, a fantastic Rolodex, so a very helpful board member. So, when you think about our story, I think you should, realize that, we've got good opportunities for growth. Organic growth is happening. It has happened. But we've got new products coming now with Gleolan and Trispan. Those commercial launches will be significant contributors in the future. We've got the pediatric study that's going to open up another 30% expansion in the US and open up licensing opportunities in Europe. We've got further reimbursement now for Trispan in place in Canada, and we're working on that US entry, so that will be a big upside for us. We're working on treosulfan in Canada. Registration has gone in, and we're working on the ROFR for the US. And again, that's another big opportunity for us. Rupall, Rasuvo, Metoject, Ixinity, all are good, strong growth opportunities into the future. And so that will continue to contribute as we go forward. And then, obviously, we're not going to stop here. We're going to continue to look for good opportunities in the therapeutic areas where we already are. So hematology, rheumatology, allergy. We're looking for opportunities in those areas that will allow us to continue to leverage our infrastructure that's in place. And that's really our story. I think if you look at our company, there's little risk in terms of R&D. We're a commercial play. We have strong growth opportunities, and we expect to see this business much, much larger into the future. The reason we founded it and put together 3 specialty pharma companies 2 years ago was to start to get better scale. As we get scale, more and more opportunities come to us and give us more opportunity to grow the top line and obviously deliver meaningful EBITDA. So that's our story. Happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Ken and Roland. So we'll open things up to Q&A. If you're watching from YouTube, you can email me at tina@atcap.ca or input questions into the dialog box below. Just to get started, there's some questions around Ixinity. Maybe, I know you don't give official guidance, but you can give us an update on how things are progressing and the kind of synergies that you're seeing with Ixinity in the US.
Yeah, it's a great question. So Ixinity, the restructure was done the same day as close. Thank goodness we did it that day because obviously, as you know, the whole pandemic struck in March. So we got structured properly. That allowed our people to continue to promote remotely, even through the pandemic. And we've been getting new starts. So we continue to show growth on Ixinity, and we do expect that to continue into the future. We have been doing the work on the Canadian registration. So we think within the next 24 months, we'll have the Canadian registration completed, and that will give us another opportunity for growth. So we're really pleased to have Ixinity because it's strategic with treosulfan. Both are hematology products, and so there's a lot of synergy between the two.
There's a question from the audience about the potential competition for some of your U.S. products. What competition are you seeing out there, I guess, potentially for Ixinity and for Rasuvo?
Yeah, good question. So both products have got good IP, so we don't expect any generic competition. So it will be competition from other branded pharmaceuticals. The competition on Ixinity it's been there for years. The product that's the market leader is Medexus, which is about a $250 million product. It's been in the market for 22 years. So we have certain clinical benefits over that product, and that's where we're stealing our share. So that's our main competitor. It doesn't get a lot of promotion now because obviously it's hit peak sales and it's quite mature. So we're working to steal share from that. On Rasuvo, again, we have a direct competitor in Otrexup, but we've demonstrated that commercially we can beat them soundly, and we continue to grow while they're flat. So I think we perform very well relative to the competition, and that is our strength. I mean, we've got a good commercial organization that can take branded pharmaceuticals like this and win even in competitive situations.
And are you able to give some color on the timelines for some of the Canadian products that you're planning on bringing into the U.S.?
Yeah, the most immediate one would be triamcinolone hexacetonide or Trispan. So we are in active negotiations now with the FDA to solve a drug shortage that exists on that drug. As I mentioned, it's drug of choice for children. So it's really important to get this drug back into the market. So the FDA is motivated to help us. So they've been a good partner in that regard. So we expect something to happen certainly by the end of this calendar year.
And just on that note, obviously there's some supply issues that are taking place that are affecting that market. Is the U.S. having the same supply issues?
Correct. It's an international issue in that the manufacturing facility that used to make the drug had GMP issues and could no longer do it, which left a big void in the marketplace. So we've been able to fill that void with a partner from Western Europe, and we think we will be successful in doing it for both U.S. and Canada. The FDA is very eager to have a replacement product. It's a very important drug.
And just in the same vein, talking about manufacturing, there's a question from the audience about Medexus's availability and manufacturing capacity, especially as you grow.
Yeah, great question. So we don't manufacture anything ourselves. So everything is manufactured by a third party. So we are in constant contact with those third parties, which typically are the discoverers of these drugs. They usually own their own plants, but not always. And they've got all kinds of redundancies built into their system. So even in the COVID pandemic, we have not had any supply issues and have been able to put as much product into the marketplace as necessary without issue. We always hold lots of safety stock because anything could happen. So we hold safety stock to make sure that if there is an issue at one of the manufacturers, we're able to adapt.
And on the FDA side of things, is there anything in the FDA development process that could be a threat to some of your U.S. products?
No, because both products that we have on market are already approved, and so little risk in anything changing. The only risk would be on products that we're trying to bring to market, and we recognize that there's always some registration risk. It's usually low because most of the drugs that make it to this stage have been approved elsewhere, typically Western Europe or sometimes Canada. So we know where the issues are with the dossiers, and we make sure we address them before we put the file into an authority like the FDA or Health Canada.
And there's a question about raising capital in the markets in order to fund organic growth. Obviously, last quarter you generated some cash flow from operations, and maybe you can speak to how you're funding the organic growth.
Yeah, the organic growth doesn't need funding. I mean, it's all the infrastructure is already in place. So we're growing, with our sales force, which is, now a fixed cost and flat. So as revenues grow, obviously our ratios improve and we produce more cash flow and more EBITDA. So the question really then comes down to, okay, for future products, how do you fund those? And typically, a licensing deal, often we can usually do it just from cash flow or cash on hand. Licensing deals don't take as much capital as M&A. M&A, we've done 2 deals in 2 years, and that's probably a good pace. We probably wouldn't want to do more than that. So I think the next few deals that you'll see come from us will be license deals. There are 3 late-stage negotiations going on now. And we certainly hope to get all 3, but certainly would expect to at least get a couple of them, and probably before the end of the year, calendar year.
Are those licensing deals focused on the same therapeutic areas that you're currently focused on?
Yeah, absolutely, all 3. So we're looking at adding product to the therapeutic areas where we already have people. That's where we get the best leverage from our organization. So all 3 are in therapeutic areas where we already are.
And just going back to treosulfan in the U.S., when would you expect to be making a decision on the ROFR for that?
Certainly, it's active discussions now. So we would expect, by end of year, there'll be news on treosulfan. The product's already been filed with the FDA. So obviously the timeline's relatively short. You could see it happen, within 6 to 12 months on market.
And there's another question from the audience about whether or not you would want to take on more leverage for the balance sheet. I think we kind of discussed this already in terms of licensing deals. You're able to fund that with the cash flow, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. Licensing deals don't take much capital or as much capital as M&A, so we can fund those ourselves. So yeah, we're very conscious of leverage. We don't have too much leverage. We're producing cash now, so paying down debt. And so as we grow, I think those ratios come under control. The deal that we did for Ixinity, we decided to go the debt route. We got a $20 million term loan from MidCap. Shortly after closing, we paid back $10 million, put an asset-based loan for working capital in place, and so we'll continue to use that and pay down that debt.
In terms of the pediatric trial for Ixinity, can you go through some of the potential risks? I know there's obviously, it's already FDA approved, it's already in the market. I would think that eliminates most of the risk, and then just go through, if you get approvals, how long it would take to launch and ramp up that side of the pediatrics.
Yeah, so the risk on the trial is pretty low. It's just a matter of getting enough patients exposed to the drug to demonstrate there aren't any unusual side effects. So absolutely don't expect anything to come up. The drug has been used in kids. There are physicians who are using it off-label now, so we know it's being used in that audience, but we have to have the data in order to support the registration through FDA. So that's really all we're doing. And they only want 20 people, 20 children. So, the patient number is pretty low. We got 40% of that done already, meaning we got 8 people on the trial. So we think the trial will take us the next 12 to 18 months, and then it'll take another 6 to 12 months to get the indication added to the label.
And then you're using the same sales force that you already have in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. The audience is exactly the same. It's the same physician that treats both adults and pediatric patients.
And as you move into the US with potentially treosulfan, can you give us some color on what the market size is like for treosulfan in the US?
Yeah, it's quite large. So busulfan, which is the product that we will displace, they hit peak sales of $140 million US. So we think treosulfan is in excess of a $100 million opportunity, particularly with the type of clinical benefit it demonstrates. A 26% improvement in overall survival is a massive improvement. So it's very clear, if it were a family member of ours, which drug you'd want them to be on. So we think there'll be, dramatic shift from busulfan to treosulfan. The drug is so much better that they've actually created a new category of drug for this, which is called reduced intensity conditioning agent, and will be the only drug in that category. The safety profile is just so much better than busulfan, and obviously the clinical outcome is much better too.
That's great. We have another question from the audience. Since over 70% of the last quarter revenues from the US, would you consider a NASDAQ listing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So obviously, I think if you look at our stock, you see, our volume's pretty low. It's been growing nicely, because we're starting to do these types of events and get our story out there. But, clearly we have very much a US story. And our growth opportunities are more in the US than Canada. So, we think that we ought to upgrade the listing. We went from the OTC QB to the QX, which made a difference in our volume in the last month or so. So clearly, the next step would be a NASDAQ listing.
And the company is trading at under 1 times EV per sale. And companies on the NASDAQ are trading at 4 or 5 times EV per sales. Can you kind of give some context to that? I know in Canada as well, on an EV to EBITDA basis, you're trading at a significant discount as well. As I assume that all of these catalysts are going to start to fill the valuation gap.
Yeah, that's what we think, that we're not getting a fair valuation yet. We think that, the type of story that we have is very strong. If you use any comparators, they're getting better valuations than we currently are. So we think we should get more. There's good catalysts for that to happen, which is, our organic growth, new business opportunities that we've got coming. So I think there'll be a lot of reasons for us to get a better valuation. And obviously a better listing, a NASDAQ listing would accelerate that too.
Well, that's great. I think that's all the questions that we have from the audience right now. From my perspective, I think it's a great story, undervalued, and I've been following kind of this story since the PediaPharm days. And one of the things that resonates with me is the strong organic growth, the strong M&A growth, and that you're delivering on all the things that you said you would do years ago. So I think it's rare for a company to be able to look at all their deliverables and say that they've accomplished this much. So it's a really interesting story and undervalued in my view.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you for everyone for listening into the story. Certainly happy to answer any questions that may come up in the future.
Thanks, appreciate it. Have a good one.